everyone. It is episode 418 of This is Whole Life, where every week we dig deeper into the message from the previous week and we learn to love God in a deeper and more meaningful way together, which is always a good time. That, food, well, I don't know. You never know what we might get into. Joining us this week, it is a unusual week because we have not one, but two special guests this week.
Randy's feeling a little outnumbered.
I am. Maybe for the first time, I'm trying to think. I have a feeling that this is 15 with Andy, Randy, and Jeff, or This is Whole Life. Same podcast, same stream, two different kind of sets of personalities. Pretty sure this is a first. Yeah. It is a 3-on-1 mix of female to male.
Yes.
Me being the outnumbered one, of course. In case that wasn't immediately obvious, which it probably was. So, Melanie, would you introduce our first guest, please?
Yes, I will. To my left, we have Alisha Clements, who was our very first Voices of Whole Life guest speaker for the month of June. And she spoke on When It's Not Your Season. So, looking forward to digging into that a little bit.
Excellent. And so Alisha is sitting across from me. And to my right, in the seat of honor, where Ken usually sits, because he can't be anywhere else but on the right, is...
Because he's always right.
Oh, wow.
Boy, look at that. Trying to rack up points.
The boss is gone. He's in Africa. He's not here to me. And he's going to be listening, though. But to my right is Emma Toll. She just joined the Whole Life staff this summer as our communication intern. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you.
There you go. All right. So we have a few things that we want to talk about right away. First off, it was in, let me check the notes. It was in, I believe it was second service that, no, it was first service that Deanna Carr, who is one of our Stephen Ministers leaders, got in the chat and was... And it didn't surprise me, but she was watching with her folks from Beaverton, Oregon.
Oh.
So you know Beaverton?
I do. She's in the Pacific Northwest.
There you go. I thought you might. So I figured that would be, you would know where that was. Second, Deanna had a lot of really cool things to say in the message about, and she was picking up on things that you were saying, Alisha, about the way that Stephen's ministers walk alongside of our members here. And so today in the show notes, if you swipe up, you will find a link, as very often you will, a link to our Stephen ministers here at Whole Life Church who are willing to walk alongside if you're thinking about and you're feeling like those seasons, maybe winter or fall, if those aren't your favorite, or vice versa, whatever your fall, spring, summer, wherever they fall in the list for you, if it's feeling like it's not your season, please do reach out to them and see if they can be of service to you, because a lot of people have found them to be extremely comforting and useful in their time of need, and so we would like to extend that to you as always. And we had an email again this week.
Oh.
So, Alisha, listen real close. Okay, she's watching. She's got this down already. Here we go. Wow. Alisha delivered a humdinger of a message last Sabbath. I love that word, humdinger.
Wow,
that's a great word.
That means good. Humdinger.
Yeah, I had no idea. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and you never hear humdinger anymore, and I really feel like we should put that back into the lexicon more, but that's a conversation for another day. It was a message that I needed to hear. I'd like to thank Alisha for being brave enough, wise enough, and dare I say, oh boy, are you ready? Stubborn enough to share her story of faith. Being stubborn in one's faith is something we should all strive for, and I'm going to try to do so on a daily basis. And here we're going to give away who it was. As always, the Whole Life Church family remains in my prayers. Would you like to finish?
Carolina Dave.
There you go. All right. Thank you, Carolina Dave, as always, for giving us a night. Oh, and you know what? I forgot. Page 2, there was a PS.
Oh.
Speaking to me, he said, you and Melanie should, in air quotes, redecorate Ken's office while he's away.
Ooh.
That way he'll know that he was missed.
Oh, that is a great idea.
And there was a little emoticon there that I was like, I wasn't sure what it meant. It's a little purple face with little horns, and it says, and so I looked it up, and it's a smiling face with horns. So it's a good.
Oh.
It's a but
Sure.
All
it's
happen.
you know,
Mischief.
in the details. Get there. So anyway,
That's a great idea.
and then I had my first question, and this is probably you tell me if this is a question you can answer. It came up in the chat. Matthew was our online worship host this week, and he mentioned peaches.
Yes.
Okay, tell us about. Let's do this. Tell us about peaches, and then tell us a little bit about yourself, so that people have a little bit more get to know you. Than maybe if there's anything you didn't mention in the message, trying to save time and all that you could tell us today.
Well, so I'll start with the peaches first. Everyone, like really, really close to my family, especially my family itself, calls me Peachy. So growing up, my brother and my dad fight about who came up with it.
Oh, okay.
But supposedly, according to my brother, it was because he couldn't figure out how to say Alisha. And he had like a little bit of a stutter growing up. But so then Peachy was easier for him. And then that just became my family nickname.
Peachy.
Peachy, yeah.
It's cute.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, hold on. Okay, save the rest. Family nickname.
Oh,
Melanie.
I never had a family nickname.
Wow, really?
No, they just straight up called me Melanie
The whole time?
the whole time.
They really missed out.
I mean, there are so many different variations that could have happened, but nope.
You mean you weren't Doc? Or they should have seen into the future.
But I have a feeling that you had a nickname growing up, Randy. What was yours?
Mine, my uncle gave it to me early on. Well, I had two. So people still call me Ran Man.
Oh, yes.
Because my cousin Patrick, growing up, he beat Rob Schneider to the punch. I'm pretty sure Rob Schneider somehow, I mean, my mother's maiden name is Schneider, so maybe there's a connection, something that I just don't know about. But my cousin would make fun of me, and he'd be like, "Hey, it's the Ren Man," and he's like Ren Daddy, and all these different names that he used to call me. And so a long time ago, he's like, you are the original Ran Man. He's like, it was first. I coined it. I'm first. You're first. And I'm like, okay. But to the other side of the family, I was Ace.
Ace.
So for whatever that is.
Well, where
So-
did that come from?
Well, I think it was after an episode of doing something really, really stupid, and it was more of a nice going, Ace kind of thing. Yeah.
There was an edge of sarcasm on there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was, and it probably was accurate and appropriate for the conditions that I was in at that point. So, and my mom will still sometimes call me Ace. So that's mine.
All right.
Emma? This is confession time.
Not very exciting, just kind of like MZ.
MZ.
If you want to be
cute.
really exciting, MZ Doodle.
MZ, dude. Aw.
Wow.
Yeah, I
nice.
know.
I love that. I call Sparkle is my Emily's name for her, but everyone calls her Emmers or
Emmers too.
Emmy Doodiddles.
Oh,
Yeah,
love that
So-
one.
Wow,
Everybody-
that's right up there with Humdinger.
I like Emma. I like Emma. Like when she's in a real good mood, I'll call her Emmalicious, and she's be like, "Yeah." So
That's awesome.
Wait, you said Emmer
Emmy,
Doodles?
Emmy Doodiddles.
Emmy Doodle. I'm
So-
gonna have my sister start calling me that.
I like it. I think it, Emma, Emmy. It's it's pretty
Yeah, yeah.
close. I think it can
No,
work.
it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Continue on, Alicia. Peaches, if you will.
Yeah. So it actually got to a certain point where my friends that were family, when they were referring like to other friends, they're like, "Oh yeah, Alicia did blank," and that other friend would be like, "Who?" And then be like, "Oh, Peachy. Oh, Peachy. Yeah. Okay, I'm on the same page now.
Good job, Peachy.
I had a folder called Peachy when I was in grade school. Did you have those?
A folder?
Peachy folders?
Oh, folders. No, I had Trapper Keeper.
Oh, you were one of those kids.
I was like,
Okay.
Velcro. I can't Velcro today. Nope, there it goes. Yeah, no, I was Trapper Keeper.
No, your story is much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Because if they forget your real name in a heat of battle or just in the moment, then it's stuck.
Yep.
Okay,
I've
cool.
been Peachy for a very long time.
Peachy for later. Well, it could be worse, is all I'm going to say. There's friends that have nicknames that aren't so happy with them. So I
Fair.
think PG's good.
Fair.
All right. So tell us the honest truth here. Did you volunteer or were you voluntold?
I volunteered.
Wow. Brave soul. Brave soul.
Courageous, yes.
And you volunteered to tell your story.
Yes.
Oh, even doubly impressive. I'm just saying, I've had the opportunity to preach a few times, and I know stories make it in there within, because they always do. That's kind of what makes it interesting, get people to know you and whatever. But when the whole story is your story, that's a little...
You're putting yourself out there.
I don't know if I want to grab that knob and actually pull that door open. Yeah. Any apprehension?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I didn't sleep much the night before. But
You looked refreshed. You looked.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's what black tea will do for you
Yeah. Okay. Well.
when you're a tea person like me.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think the main reason why I volunteered it is because, struggling so much with all of that. I know other people have struggled too, but not a lot of people talk about struggling.
Yeah.
Especially, I think sometimes in the Christian community, we hide our struggles because we want to act like everything is fine because we have God. But I think because we have God, we're allowed to struggle because we can rely on Him during our struggles. And I think that's actually one of... I don't know if selling point is the right word, but selling point of being able to be a Christian and loving that, having that loving relationship with God is no matter what I'm going through, no matter how much I'm struggling, I have someone more powerful, all knowledgeable that I can rely on instead.
Okay, well, that wraps up today's show, guys. That was the perfect answer. I don't think we can. No, early on in your message, you started with Ecclesiastes, the Ecclesiastes that everyone knows about seasons. And I was like, okay, all right, seasons, that's a good way to start tying this all together. And just by the title of the message, when it's not your season, I was like, okay, well, we kind of know where we're headed. But before we even got to your story, in the chat, the debate was on about Ecclesiastes. And for some people, it was, I believe it was T. Cinco that said the ambiguity of Ecclesiastes was a comfort. Like just knowing that God has put these out there and given us them to be confident in brings a calmness. And then Matthew was on the other side saying, man, I hate reading things that I don't understand. Like if I read them, I don't know what you're saying. And so for him, it was like, this frustrates me a little bit because I'm supposed to be taking this as, don't worry, I've got you. There's seasons for this. We're not promising the rose garden and everything's going to be hunky-dory all the time. And then, there's somebody else sitting in this the same place and time saying, oh man, that's a real comfort to me. And then there's you who's about to tell us about a 9-year, like not my season kind of thing, where everything just keeps piling up and you think to yourself, oh, I see a little light. And, every time it's like, oh, there's a little bit of traction. And then it was like, oh, no, we can't have that. Let's push back. Let's move back. And clearly, though, there was so many people resonating with your story. We'll get to some of the comments today about people who were just so, even like Carolina Dave, just really happy that this was a message that was being preached this week at this time. And yet there's people, if just even the ambiguity of Ecclesiastes, let alone the total ambiguity of the struggle and of the journey and of the different things that all seem like maybe they're good at some point, maybe they're not, or how am I going to get through this? Where's God in this? How did you approach going into the message to try to balance? Because 9 years is a long time. And if you're in that for, even a part of that time, you have to be feeling like, okay, God, whatever it is that we're supposed to be learning here, if you could just go ahead and make that easy, that'd be great, because I'm getting a little tired of it. Maybe I'd like a little break. So how did you, because I felt like there was a lot more that you probably didn't say, because you didn't want to like totally make us all like bring us all the way down, but yet there was a lot of positivity in what you had to say. How did you balance that approach?
Honestly, Melanie helped a lot, and so did Ken. Like when I first met with them officially and talked about kind of the topic I had and what I wanted people to get out of it and why I wanted to preach it in the first place, they kind of helped guide where like I should be more specific and more general, which really helped me as well. But balancing like the quote unquote good versus bad parts of what has happened during that 9 years, I tried to keep it to the major events, which was mostly at the beginning. I did have other major events that happened during that time, like my other grandfather wound up passing as well. But I didn't want to only focus on the negative, even though that was a very large part of that period.
Yeah.
Because the point of the sermon was, how do you get through that negative time? So I think it was important to mention the negativity and the most major bad things that happened, but more focus on how do you survive it, which I guess could be construed as like that hopeful, lightful balance part to it. Because without that survival piece, it's all kind of moot.
Yeah. Well, just listening to, I felt like people were taking the journey with you, because I feel like we've all had those, a loved one that you hold so close that when they pass, you can't help but notice this huge missing piece in your life. And those can be hard to get over. And of course, everyone can resonate with health issues, and how those, even if they, are something that comes out okay in the end, they're so stressful during that time. And then to put those on in multiples, where do you feel like, and this was something, and maybe I missed it, but I really wanted to know during the message, like, where did you start at the beginning of your message? As like, how did you feel as a Christian? Did you feel like, man, I've got my stuff pretty well together? I know you mentioned, and it was a shock to a few of us that Christians weren't perfect. So thanks for blowing that bubble out of the water. But did you start with like, I feel like I'm pretty good, and I'm growing. I feel comfortable with where I'm at, and then this came, or was it a low that kind of discontinued, and how did you come out to the other side, like a start and an end, if you have it?
Do you mean as far as like when I started writing the sermon, or when I started first experiencing
it way back in the beginning? So
my journey with God has, I feel like most of us are kind of up and down. But for the most part, after high school, because I did grow up in the Seventh-day Adventist faith, and I always did believe in God. After high school, my brother and I kind of went church hopping for a little while to figure out where we kind of fit.
Okay.
That's how we found WholeLife, actually.
All right.
And then we started bringing our friends and stuff. So that's the crew you always see us kind of hanging out with. But I felt fairly secure in my faith and in my relationship with God before all that started. I think my grandfather dying was a very big blow to me, because he was so faithful and believed in God so much. It wasn't so much of a, God, why did you let my grandfather die? Because we all do pass at some time. And he did have a lot of health issues, and we did make the decision to, follow his will and things like that. It was more of a, without this strong leader teaching me how to believe, how do I still believe myself? My grandmother still helped with that, because she still has a really strong faith as well. And sometimes when I'm having a hard time, I'll call her up and she'll read me Bible verses.
Oh.
Or like if she hears from my mom that I have a hard time, she'll randomly call me up and read me Bible verses or offer to pray with me.
Probably won't hear this, but we love you, Grandma.
Yeah. I'll have to tell her. But I think that's partially why my faith was so shaken, because I had believed I had a fair foundation as well. But when someone that has that much belief kind of disappears from your life, it feels like that leading string is gone, that you're kind of cut from that and you need to build that firm foundation yourself.
Wow. So what did you feel like your grandpa, you mentioned that firm foundation, what did he provide in you that, I mean, because obviously that, even though it was very difficult, it was probably something that you stood on at probably multiple times through this ordeal. If he had that kind of impact on you, can you identify what it was about his either faith style? Was it a belief, or just, sometimes that person just is like, I'm so comfortable in my faith when I'm around them because they get me. What do you think it was?
I think it was he was a very action type Christian. Is the best way I can think of putting it. Okay. He believed in God and he showed it, like in every aspect of his life. So he was actually a CFO at Advent Health. He had a lot of very high positions in very high companies, but he would go and wash the dishes. He was a very humble person and showed that no matter who he was a servant of God and of other people, and always willing to talk about faith. We always prayed, at the dinner table. If we were ever going through a hard time, again, the Bible verses. He was always very generous with his time and his money. I feel like really showed what I felt like living a Christian should look like.
Wow. Man, that brings someone to my mind. I'm not gonna mention it just because, well, for whatever reason. But that, as you were describing that person, this acquaintance of mine who I haven't talked to in a while, that's really what it is. Really, kind of the same type person. And when you're right, that kind of a personality just brings you in, and it's hard to remove yourself, even though, this person is still alive, but it's hard. We don't see each other very often, and life changes have made it nearly impossible for us to communicate. But I miss that person, like, just a ton. Like, it almost feels like they're not here because we don't get to communicate. I was just curious because that was, I think, of all the emotion that you showed, it was about your grandpa. That was definitely the one that just kind of pulled on my heartstrings when you said it, and was just curious because I think those are the kinds of people we look for, that have all those things that maybe we have some of them, but we don't have all of them, and we're learning. And it's like, I don't want to stop learning. I don't want to stop mimicking or getting comfortable with being like. And for sometimes, like, how can you be so comfortable in this? And oh man. So that was, thank you for sharing that. The other thing I wanted to ask you about that I thought that maybe everyone, I saw heads just from the stream when you mentioned it, I saw heads going up and down. And it was when you mentioned the new person that had entered your life that seemed like, a real positive, like, oh, seasons are changing for the better. And I feel like that's one that no matter, if you're in your teens or later, I feel like that's one that we can all resonate with, that at some point in our life, whether it was maybe not necessarily a down time, but where we end up at very minimum, we end up disappointed and probably hurt a little bit because what we thought was something really amazing, and maybe a gift from God in some cases, where it's like, man, God knew what I needed. I'm kind of down, and now I have this person. And so, and I know that, and this is certainly personal, so please don't feel like you have to answer, but I feel like there's an opportunity there also for you sharing your journey. What was it that, was there anything that you would do differently about that relationship, knowing what you know now? And maybe what did you take from that experience that you will apply to however that next new person might come into your life in the future?
I think if I had a choice, I wouldn't have entered in any sort of relationship or situationship or whatever you want to call it with that person. I would have probably avoided it entirely. But that being said, I still don't. It's going to be cliche, but I don't know if I would change it. Because I still had lessons I needed to learn. It still would have been nice not to go through all of those things that I went through. It would be absolutely great. But I don't think I could have changed it, even if I wanted to, because of where I was and mentally, physically, all the above.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything I could have done different.
I was just going to ask that as a follow-up. If it was it circumstances? If you'd have met this person outside of maybe in a different season, do you think it would have been the same? Or do you think because I think that's where sometimes we're so excited about, this could be something that would really, really help me. But then there's also the trepidation of like, I don't know if I can handle one more thing going wrong if this is not what I think it is. So do you think it was just because of where you were or in the situation, or?
I think it was part of it. I think if I had been in a better season, I wouldn't have allowed what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that hits home to any, it hits home for me. I can certainly feel that at a really solid level. So yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just think it's so important because we end up finding, and I think that whether we are leaning hard on God, sometimes we like to put things in God's court, like, oh, thank you, God, for this gift. Mm-hmm. And it's like, this is more of a test than a gift. Maybe this isn't, maybe this isn't what you think it is, or maybe this isn't that at all. I don't know where you're getting this from, and so right. I feel like when you're in the valley, so many things seem shiny and new, and let's roll the dice because it can't get any worse. But then sometimes it gets worse, and so I just felt like everyone was with you on that one, and just wanted to explore that a little bit more. So thank you for being vulnerable. Yeah. Did you have, Melanie?
Oh no, I was just exercising my hand.
She's like, Alicia's doing all the talking. I'm just sitting here looking awesome.
I know, she's got this covered. So.
The other part was, I really resonated when you were reading different Bible verses and quotes about all this. I knew you before, and that was going in the chat about, I knew you before you were born. The plans I made for you, and man, is that really hard to rectify when it's like, okay, here's what I'm reading. Dear Lord, do you see where I'm at currently? Have you felt what I'm going through? And during the process of this, was it more of a hindrance? Was it a help? Did it seem disconnected? Because that's how I have felt in the past, is like, wow, I hear it and I want to believe it. And in my heart, I'm pretty sure I believe it. But right now, I am not feeling this at all.
I feel like it was mostly pain and confusion. Confusion about like why all of these great things are being promised in the Bible, but they weren't happening for me, despite me praying for it, despite me knowing and believing God could do it. And then that is kind of where the pain came in, because God is capable of anything. And so it was a mixture between that pain of like, why isn't this happening? And the confusion of, well, I know you can, but why aren't you?
Oh, man. So 2020, you look back at everything now and you say, okay, I can chalk this one up to, like you said, maybe there was lessons I still needed to learn, so maybe I wouldn't have taken that back. But that long really seems like maybe, like Alisha couldn't have needed that many lessons, could she? It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem fair. I'm just, I'm pro little guy or little woman in this case. Like, come on, man.
Now, are you assuming that those were intended for lessons? I mean, that's kind of an underlying assumption you have to make for that.
Okay, well, if they're not lessons, what are they?
I don't know. Experiences. I think that's one of the values, though, of the book of Ecclesiastes and really the book of Job, because there's this thread that goes throughout the Bible about, the goodness of God and everything, all things work together for good, and we're moving toward an intended purpose. And then, Job comes along and says, wait a minute, why is all this happening to me? I didn't do anything wrong. And then his friends come with all of this, extraneous information. And then you have, the author of Ecclesiastes who comes along and says, hey, you know what? Life is meaningless, and then you die. The end. And so I think, really those two books especially are dissidents, and they end up being an interruption to the flow. But for people who are in an experience of, in a season or in a place where, there's existential crisis and you're saying, you know what, maybe life is meaningless and then you die. Sometimes it's nice to just find somebody else who commiserates with you a little bit, And so I think that maybe that's why Ecclesiastes spoke to you so much, Alisha.
Maybe.
Well, I noticed you didn't bring Job into it. So, was that something specific? Was it something you thought about during the, during your journey? Like, man, this is like I always call it's like the Job desert experience. Like, what? And of course, I don't think the story tells us how long his was.
No.
But it seems like it's like forever.
It probably felt like forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and same.
Yeah. But I think part of the reason why I didn't include Job, even though it does bring it to mind, especially working in a hospital, I did very briefly mention it, but I've kind of had to come to believe, that God doesn't cause bad things to happen, but he can sometimes use it and sometimes he doesn't. I've had people who've had strokes, have really bad car accidents, or maybe their loved one died, but they lived. Sometimes bad things just happen. I don't think God causes bad things to happen so he can make good things out of it. So I kind of have that perspective about my bad seasons as well. Even though there were lessons I needed to learn, I don't look at it as God having me go through those specific bad things so I could learn those lessons. And it would just be really hard for me to accept a God that caused intentional suffering as well, just personally. I honestly think sometimes bad things just happen, but I think God can sometimes use those bad things to help us out in the end.
Well, I was going to ask you about your job and if that was maybe more of a gift than you might have realized in the process, just because with your position in healthcare, you definitely see people every day that have physical, problems that, you're there to try to help them, through these. Was that somehow comforting for you? Or did that just kind of play, like you just said, into is that why you don't think that God maybe does that?
I think it is a large part of why I believe that is because I don't know if I could ever tell one of my patients, I think God caused you to go through this.
Yeah.
I just don't have it in my heart. And I do really believe sometimes just bad things happen. I mean, we live in a world of sin.
Yeah.
But I did appreciate having my career while I was going through that hard time because, for one, it provided almost a place of escape. I actually worked a lot longer hours than I do now because I would rather be at work.
Yeah.
But also just the ability to think about other people and be there for other people also really helped me.
Nice. Well, let's start getting into we have about 2 pages of questions and comments. So let's get started. T. Cinco said, I love that Alisha shares that she didn't navigate her season alone. It's so important to get the help you need. Good counseling is so helpful, and this is a great time to promote Stephen ministers who are trained to walk beside those who are hurting. There's no need to go through these seasons alone. So again, if you missed it early on, swipe up in today's show notes and you will find a link to our website, to the Stevens Ministries page, where you can contact them directly. It is completely confidential, and they will be in touch with you very, very soon. And I really appreciated Matthew here. And speaking of going through Job, he said, totally not. He was our host, so he's trying to lead the pack as we go through this message. And he said, totally not trying to start a fire or anything, I promise. So don't pull out your pitchforks and knives. But what is the deal with God loving his people going through harsh seasons? I can't help to feel he enjoys seeing his people suffer. I get the concept is to build one up, but man, I read stories like Job and David, and I'm like, huh? Really? And and so there were people resonating with that thought process as well, and feeling that them processing alongside what you were saying was really powerful. And Elaine Grace said, "Thank you so much, Alicia, for your message." And she was praying for you while you were preaching. Robert Vargas, great job, Alicia. And that was so. I think people were. And it was such an important message that, again, most people don't want to get up and share that things are anything but really shiny and perfect. And have you seen my Instagram feed? Dude, life is so good. # love you, mean it. Matt, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think one of the difficult things, just responding to Matthew, one of the difficult things about the book of Job is the prologue, where there's this backstory of the accuser coming into the council and saying, "Hey, you know what? Let's really make life miserable for this guy." Yeah. Without that backstory, you would just have someone who suffers and whose friends come along and give him all kinds of weird theological input. But,
weird theological input. I like that a lot.
I like that too.
But I think with that prologue in there, we have to ask ourselves questions about theodicy. Like, does God cause this? Does God enjoy it? Is God doing this on purpose? Is God doing this? Is somebody else doing this? And I think it's helpful to remember that even though these are books of the Bible, and so we tend to kind of put them on a pedestal a little bit, but actual people wrote these books. And if you have ever gone through, and I know that most of us here have gone through, some sort of tragedy or trauma in your life, you have all kinds of different people, just like Job's friends, coming along and saying, "Oh, this is what God is doing," or "This is how God sees you," or "This is how you should respond to God." But that doesn't necessarily mean that is the end all conclusion. It just means that is that person's perspective of God and what God was doing. One of the things to remember also about the book of Job is that there's other literature that preceded Job by at least 1,000 years of innocent people who are going through difficult times and who are calling out to the gods, and whose friends come along and they try to make sense of this situation. And so, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that it's a copy of those stories, but what I'm saying is that people have been trying to process this for a long time, for thousands of years. 2,000 years before Jesus, people are trying to process this idea. And Job wasn't the first one that came along and processed this.
So, Job, real story, allegory, any way to know?
I don't know.
Okay. Second question was, I always took the meaning, or I'll say the meaning, or I've always interpreted that story as, with the prelogue, like, okay, fine. I know Job, and that's not Job. You think you know Job, but you don't know Job. You don't know Job about Job. So you can do whatever you want without killing him. I mean, we escalate to that point. So is allowing, that seems like allowing. Like, okay, I'll play by your rules. And I'm going to use, unfortunately, Job as the poker chip in this match. And he's the prize, so to say. So,
it really, it is a terrible story. I'm just going to put that out there. It's a terrible story. Can you imagine if someone came to you, Randy, and said, you know what, I'm not sure your daughter Ellie actually really loves you. Let me do things to her.
Yeah.
Just to prove that she loves you. Would you allow that?
I wouldn't, but of course that's, God that we don't understand, and is a
or a perspective that someone has of God that maybe we don't understand.
But then and this is gonna, now we're really getting into it. Sorry, but then
Matthew did this. I'm blaming it all on Matthew.
We will be looking next week for the pitchforks and the knives, so be prepared because this is all because of you. But then I have to ask, then if this is the perspective that we're left with, then if God doesn't do anything to guide the writer to a perspective that is accurate of him, then how is that helpful? And why would that be a desired outcome? That's the part I've always struggled with, because if it's a true story or if it's an allegory, I guess it doesn't really matter. I mean,
right.
At the end of the day, because it's still the story, but the outcome to me would seemingly be very important. Like the children of Israel, God is so exact. We talked last week about architecture, and we talked about the temple and the exacting standards to the mobile worship center. And yet here it's like, well, if that's what they think about me, I don't care. That's the part that doesn't make sense to me. So because to me, whether or not you allow it or you cause it isn't really. That isn't two different things to me.
I don't know that that's really the point of the book. I think the point of the book is to create a site of conversation. So I think that's partly why, some of these stories have a lot of holes and have a lot of, unsatisfactory conclusions, because they're there to create conversation about God and about our views of God, about our perspectives of God. Does this resonate with the God that you see in your mind when you're praying? I don't think that any of these were meant to be the final word. I think they were meant to be a place where we could explore.
And I don't, just to be clear, I don't think that about God. I think that I think if that story is true or not, or it's allegory, or that he allowed it in some way, if you knew that God was going to use you that way, and you knew in the prologue, he's like, yeah, look, you can do everything but kill him, then in a way that would, it'd kind of be an honor, right? Like, man, this is going to totally stink, but I'm not going to die.
But I'm going to get a book named after me.
Right. and people thousands of years from now on a podcast are going to be arguing whether or not I was real. And they're going to go, you know what, Job did pretty good given all this. We like to when God dresses him down, it's like, yo, where were you when I was forming the earth? Where were you? And where were you? And where were you? And I'm like, look, ease up, bro. This guy did a lot of suffering, and he didn't denounce you as a mere mortal. So
I can't speak for Job, but if I personally had been Job, I would have rather had my 7 sons and 3 daughters than have my name on have a book with my name on it in the Old Testament.
I don't know. Maybe. That's a tough one. We'll have to continue this conversation another time. Thank you, Matthew. All right, let's continue on. Maxine said, good morning, church. This was from first service. I really need to hear this sermon about seasons. I'm in winter now, but I was told today it is only for a time. I will try to remain stubborn in my faith and allow God, my Father, to determine the outcome and be still and wait for his timing. Amen. Come on, that's awesome. That's like, that just puts the chills and raises the hair on your arms and just makes you feel like this was definitely something that God knew you were going to do. You were going to agree to it. You weren't voluntold. And that Maxine, was going to tune in and hear what she needed to hear. So
It makes it worth it, right?
Absolutely.
It does,
yes.
So Maxine, I've been praying for you since I saw that comment on Sabbath, and I hope that all is going well. Anonymous posted this prayer that they came across on a blog, and they hoped that it would help someone. It said, Lord, I pray that this will reach a place and a space in the heart of you, the person reading it, where God will pour some fresh encouragement and a fresh wind over your perseverance, that he will reframe your mind and your thoughts around sitting in the messy middle, in the hard place and the difficult season that you might be sitting in today, and just lovingly remind and encourage you that greatness is being crafted and created right now, that when you persevere through the trials and tribulations, you will find joy. Well, that was pretty cool.
I like that messy middle.
Yeah.
That implies that there's a beginning and an end if you're in the messy middle.
I'd rather it be the messy 3/4 or 7/8. Like, are we almost done with this? Because but messy middle, I'll go for that. And Lamb, we love you as well, because Lamb loves a great pun by Albert. So we would agree with you, Lamb. And it seems how Emma was here, and this was from earlier on in the message, or early before the message. Matthew said, I'm curious to know what book did Emma really say before they bleeped it out. Give me the juice, Randy. And I'll still have to say, that's, I'm the vault. Emma has the key and only she can open it. So it was an honest mistake.
Yeah. The bleep made it sound like I said a horrible, some awful book name or whatever. No, it was just honestly a book that I had never read before. And so I just didn't want to say it, because I was like, well, I can't say that it's my favorite because I haven't even opened it. So it's called It Ends With Us. Yeah. But yeah, that was the book I said. It's not a bad book. I've just never read it. And I messed up on the video. I don't know why I said it.
It was awesome, because I'm sitting there editing late at night, and I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to do this so that they don't, but it will also catch people's attention? So it was a little bit of hazing via the video editor.
I think it caught more attention than it needed to.
And that was my plan.
Yeah.
All along.
Well, he sent this emoji that looked way too mischievous. I was like,
was it purple with horns?
No. Close to it, though, honestly. But I was like, uh-oh. I was very nervous when I turned on the TV to watch the video. But it was good.
It was fun. Everyone had fun with it in the chat too. They were commenting and having a good time about it. So, okay. Oh, here we go. Lamb also said the timing on this sermon is perfect for me to hear today. And Aaron asked, did Alicia say where she's originally from? Not a podcast question, but just curious. Are you a Florida person?
I am born and raised Floridian.
There you go. I thought so. It sounded like that from the beginning. And then Nashville Tim said, thank you for the heartfelt message, Alicia. Gathering stones. Could this be things people collect? Things that bring joy?
Possibly, if stones are your thing.
Well, there are a few different ways to...
Because I knew you weren't going to stop, right?
Well, actually, I don't want to say, because it's very vague in my head, but it potentially has something to do with reproduction, possibly.
Stones?
Depending on how you translate that. I'm just leaving it there, because actually I don't fully remember, and I'm going to say something very terribly wrong, and it's going to be on here for posterity for the rest of all time.
And then they stoned them. No, that's not it.
That's where my mind went. I was like, are you gathering stones to throw them at somebody?
I'm not sure. Well, Nashville Tim, if you'd like to give us a little more background there, tune in next week. Maybe we'll have an answer. And then to wrap it up, Anonymous, I believe it was a different Anonymous, I couldn't tell from the chat, but a partial poem from Annie Flint, which I love, says, when we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed ere the day is half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving is only begun. I thought that was pretty good.
That actually reminds me of one of my friends has been going through a hard time also recently. And she was kind of talking to me and she was questioning, God says he'll never give us more than we can handle, but this definitely feels more than I can handle. And the way I've actually always thought of that is we aren't supposed to be able to handle it. God is. So he's not giving us more than we can handle because it's supposed to be God handling it and he can handle anything.
I don't think I've thought of it that way before, because I usually argue and be like, I don't know how strong you think I am, but I'm pretty sure you're wrong. Like you carried the one and it shouldn't have something. I'm not sure where you get his calculations from, but that's really good.
Like the let go and let God kind of a mindset.
All right, so I asked Stanley this because even though he wasn't part of Voices of WholeLife, he was a member who got a chance to preach a couple weeks ago. He was the
visual arts.
Visual arts. Man, that was hard to remember.
The art of worship, visual arts.
Visual arts. And I haven't heard back. I did let him know that, Carolyn and Dave, I did let him know your challenge, and I haven't heard back, but he has been on vacation.
He's been on vacation.
So, but hopefully tune in next week and I'll see if I can get an update for you. So, would you preach again if the opportunity arose?
I feel like it's less about the opportunity, more about what I feel God wants me to do, because I felt very pulled to do this sermon. I feel like if I was going to preach again and all the effort that I did put into the sermon and all the time where I was just staring at it and be like, okay, God, tell me what to say here.
Yeah.
How do I word this better? It would definitely have to be a topic I felt led to.
Okay.
But I would be willing to.
But it wasn't a bad experience.
No,
you
no.
Enjoyed, at the end, when it was all over, the work was done and the jitters and everything that always comes with your first time. It was worth it.
It was definitely worth it.
Awesome.
You know what I think is kind of poetic?
What's
I'm gonna wax poetic here for a second.
And we've all been about poetry today, so continue on.
Yes.
Continue on.
A few months ago, I remember when you had your surgery, on your thyroid, and you couldn't speak at all. You really had no voice.
Yeah.
And now she's the one kicking off our Voices of WholeLife series, and I just think that's a pretty amazing metaphor. So thank you for all that hard work that you put into this. I know how hard you worked because I watched it. So thank you for everything that you did to put into this.
Well, I always say that the Voices of WholeLife is my favorite series every single year, because not only do we get to hear messages from somebody new, someone probably most of us don't know intimately well, where it's like, hey, I know I've said hello, we've had conversations in the past, but never really a deep conversation where you would find out details like what you shared in the message. And not that everyone's message is about that, but you also get a chance just to see and hear and kind of feel their persona as they preach. And if you go and speak with them that day, and then I get lucky enough because we get to have them most of the time they're able to, and we'll work in, like if you've already preached a sermon, you can do a podcast, right? Like that's an easy ask for most people. And so I get to meet people on a one-on-one basis here and get to ask more questions, get to know them. And I feel like I get to make new friends every year. So I hope you listening at home feel the same, that you get a chance to meet somebody new, learn something new. And if our episode today is anything like the chat from this past week, y'all are learning something new and you learn something valuable, I trust. Next week is
Next
Nate.
week we have Nate Elias.
Yes. I couldn't remember the last name.
Yeah.
I know Nate, but I don't.
Nate was a pastor for, I think, 18 years, and now he works for Advent Health as a chaplain. So he's got a great perspective that he's going to bring to us next week.
Is he also going through the the Dr. Bachman School of Preaching at WholeLife?
Well, he's coming with 18 years worth of experience. So, he's got his style. But
so have you heard? Do you know what
I do. I have read the sermon manuscript. I have. Yes.
Any? No, you don't give teasers.
I don't
Never
give
mind.
Teasers.
I forget
the title. I'll tell you. The title is Styles of Connection.
Styles of Connection. See, when
That's
Ken's
all you
here, here,
forget.
he'll puke the whole thing to you. Yeah, but he's not here. And then we're always like, and then we'll try to get something. When Melanie, what was the last one you did? The series?
Oh goodness, I don't know. That was last year.
Yeah, I forget. I can see the logo in my head, but I can't actually tell
Oh,
you.
Holy Encounters.
That's right, Holy Encounters.
Yeah.
And every week we're like something, just a tidbit. And she's like, no. That's why you come to church and listen,
If
or
I
you
tell
watch
you
online.
what I'm going to say, why do you need to listen to me for 25 minutes?
Because one sentence can't be drawn out for 25 minutes. I'm pretty sure, unless you turn it on like minus 100 speed or something like that. But anyway, I digress. Alicia, thank you not only for kicking off the best series of the year. Thank you for coming and sharing with the podcast. Really, really do appreciate it, and really did find your message to be engaging and just to be thoughtful, and clearly it left an impression on WholeLife. So the Voices of WholeLife is off to a big start because of you. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. I was very blessed through the whole process to be able to do it, honestly.
That's amazing. Awesome. And Emma, thank you as well for joining us today. And I think, are we missing something?
Are we missing something?
Oh, you know what? You're going to find in the show notes. I already have the show notes done, so that's why I know you're going to find them there. And August 8th and 9th, right here at WholeLife Church, it will be the Global
Leadership
Summit. Oh, that is wonderfully done. Thank you, Melanie, for helping me out. For those of you not here in the studio, sometimes we have to do what we have to do. But we just want to make sure that you don't miss this opportunity to take advantage of the voices of a lot of great leaders that will speak into your leadership style. August 8th and 9th, right here at WholeLife Church. Swipe up in today's show notes and you'll find the link for that so you can get registered to beat that early bird to July 17th. After that, the price goes up. So why pay more when you could pay less?
Why pay more?
I feel like there's a television commercial. Why pay more when you could pay less?
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. Maybe it was. Well, anyway. Moving on. All right, that's going to do it for this week, guys. Thanks for listening and have a great week. That one I can do. That one I can do. Stop it. No.